Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're really going to try and connect some powerful ideas across centuries.
Yeah, looking at four key biblical texts.
Exactly. We've got Psalms 2 and 27, and then passages from Acts 13 and John 14.
Mhm.
Our mission really is to figure out how these texts speak to, finding solid ground when life feels uncertain. It's a pretty timeless question, right?
Absolutely. And the sources are interesting. Old Testament poetry, historical accounts from Acts, and then Jesus' own words in John. Different voices, different contexts.
But hopefully converging on some core truths.
Yeah.
Let's see what stands out.
Sounds good. Psalm 2 is a great place to start. It really sets a dramatic scene, this idea of divine kingship.
Okay, yeah, let's dive straight in. Psalm 2 kicks off with that really powerful image. I have set my king on Zion, my holy mountain. What's the core message there?
Well, what's fascinating is just the sheer assertion of divine authority. Zion, the hill in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
it was the symbolic heart of God's presence, his earthly rule. So for God to declare, I've set my king there, it's more than just politics.
It's a statement, right?
It's a statement of God's sovereign choice. It tells you this leader isn't just anyone. They have a divine mandate, legitimacy.
And then it gets even more, intense. That decree, you are my son, today I have begotten you. That feels like a really pivotal statement.
Oh, absolutely. In the ancient world, being called a son like that, it often meant inheriting authority, entering a really significant relationship.
Okay.
And while initially, it pointed to Israel's kings, its prophetic reach goes, much further. That phrase, today I have begotten you, it kind of hints at a specific moment.
A moment of what? Divine affirmation.
Exactly. A unique relationship. It suggests this figure isn't just, the next in line. There's something uniquely special about his connection to God.
Right. Which obviously takes on new meaning later on. But sticking with Psalm 2 for a second, it then talks about the nations being this king's inheritance, the ends of the earth, his possession. That's just a massive scale of influence.
It really is. It emphasizes the universal scope of this king's reign. It's not just one tribe, one territory.
It's global.
It encompasses all peoples, all places. Think of it as a declaration of ultimate authority over everything, a ruler whose impact is meant to be global.
But then there's that sudden shift, isn't there? The rod of iron being dashed like a potter's vessel. It goes from inheritance to something that sounds pretty harsh. Judgment, maybe?
Exactly. It highlights that this divine authority, it isn't just for show. The rod of iron symbolizes unyielding power, the ability to enforce the rule.
And the potter's vessel.
That speak to the utter fragility of those who stand against this divinely appointed king. It's a stark warning, really. Consequences for opposition.
So respect the authority.
Right. It suggests a need for respect, for proper alignment with this authority.
And right after that, the psalm advises earthly rulers to be wise and serve the Lord with fear. It's like the takeaway message for those in charge.
Precisely. The psalm isn't just predicting things, it's offering practical guidance.
Exactly.
Recognizing the power of this divine king should lead to wisdom, accountability for earthly leaders.
Makes sense.
It sets up this crucial link between divine authority and human responsibility. A reminder that even the rulers are ultimately under a greater authority.
Okay, so let's keep that idea, the unique son, the vast scope of authority. Let's keep that in mind. Because when we turn to Acts 13...
Yeah, we see the early Christians making a very specific link.
Right. How does the speaker in Acts connect Psalm 2 directly to Jesus?
Well, what's striking is how they saw Jesus as the fulfillment, the long-awaited fulfillment of these Old Testament promises.
Yeah.
In Acts 13, the speaker lays out Israel's history, highlighting God's faithfulness.
Okay.
And then he points directly to Jesus' resurrection as the key moment, the moment God made good on his ancient word, specifically quoting Psalm 2.
And that exact phrase comes up again, doesn't it? You are my son. Today I have begotten you.
Yes. Directly tied to the resurrection.
Wow.
The resurrection became the lens, you see, through which they understood that ancient prophecy. It wasn't just Jesus coming back to life. It was God's ultimate declaration of his sonship, conquering death itself.
The aha moment, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. For them, this prophecy wasn't just old words. It found its ultimate meaning right there in Jesus.
And Acts then lays out the sequence. The condemnation by the leaders in Jerusalem who, it says, didn't recognize him or the prophecies.
Right. That's
His death, even though he hadn't done anything deserving it. The burial, and then God raising him. And it stresses the eyewitnesses. Why is that sequence so significant?
That sequence is crucial. It establishes the historical reality, but also the unexpected nature of it all.
Oh, so.
Well, the condemnation and death highlight the human rejection, but the resurrection, witnessed by many, underscores the divine intervention. It's about grounding their faith in, like, verifiable events.
Within their history and scripture.
Exactly. It's saying, look, this isn't just a nice story. This happened. We have people who saw it.
And the core message, the good news in Acts, is this promise fulfilled through the resurrection. So for them, Psalm 2 wasn't just an old poem.
Not at all. It was a prophecy about him. The resurrection wasn't just some isolated miracle. It was the key that unlocked the meaning of prophecies like Psalm 2.
It showed God's promises weren't abstract.
Precisely. They had come true in Jesus. This became the very heart of their message, the good news that God had acted decisively in history.
Okay. All right, let's shift gears a bit now to Psalm 27. This one feels much more personal, doesn't it?
It really does.
It starts with that incredibly powerful declaration, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life, of whom shall I be afraid?" What stands out to you most in that opening?
For me, it's the sheer unshakable confidence. It's such a personal declaration of trust that actively, confronts fear head on.
Mm-hmm.
The image of light that speaks to guidance, clarity, banishing uncertainty, salvation is rescue, security, and stronghold. Well, that evokes an impenetrable refuge.
It's a powerful internal conviction.
Totally. It's saying, whatever comes, I have a secure foundation.
And that idea of the Lord as light, it connects so directly to the uncertainties many of us feel, right? How does that image speak to those times?
Oh, it's such a timeless comfort. When we feel lost, unsure of the path,
Yeah.
the idea of a guiding light is incredibly relevant.
Yeah.
It's about having a source of clarity, something that can illuminate the way forward, even when everything around us feels dark or confusing.
Yeah.
It offers direction when we feel most adrift.
And stronghold, that taps into that deep human need for security, doesn't it? Especially when the world feels, well, unstable.
Exactly. Life throws all sorts of things at us, challenges. The image of God as a stronghold isn't about, escaping those challenges,
Right.
but about having an unshakable place of refuge within them. It's knowing there's a source of peace, of stability that external stuff can't touch.
Like an inner anchor.
Yeah, an inner anchor in the middle of the storm. That's a good way to put it.
Okay, let's bring in John 14 now. Here we have Jesus reassuring his disciples. He says, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me." What's the immediate context here? Why are they troubled?
Well, this is a really significant moment. Jesus knows he's about to leave them physically, and they are, understandably, terrified, confused.
Or about what happens next.
Exactly. So his words are a direct attempt to calm those fears, to give them a new focus for their faith, especially with this impending separation and all the uncertainty it brings.
He then talks about many rooms in my Father's house and going to prepare a place for them, promising to come back. That's clearly meant to give them hope for the future, right?
Absolutely. It shifts their gaze, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From the immediate distress to a future hope, a permanent place with God. It's a promise that their current troubles aren't the end of the story.
That something secure and lasting awaits them.
Yes, through their connection with him.
But the core of this passage, I think, is Jesus' declaration. "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." Now, considering the disciples were literally asking, how can we know the way?
Okay.
How powerful is that statement?
It's incredibly definitive and exclusive. When Thomas basically asks for directions,
Yeah, show us the way.
Jesus doesn't give them a map. He says, I am the map. He's not just showing the way, he is the way.
And the truth and the life.
Well, truth speaks to the reality of God, his purposes, and life points to that eternal life found in him. So he's saying the answer to their uncertainty isn't a set of rules or directions.
It's a person.
It's a person himself.
And it's really striking how that reflection on Psalm 27 that we mentioned earlier says, following Jesus leads us directly to the Father. It's like an echo of this very idea from John.
Precisely. That personal trust, that reliance in Psalm 27, it finds its ultimate focus in Jesus in the New Testament. The way the psalmist finds in God becomes specifically identified as Jesus.
He's the access point.
He's presented as the direct connection. Yeah, the access point to God the Father.
So, thinking back to those uncertainties we talked about in Psalm 27, how does Jesus' statement in John 14 address them directly?
It offers just such a clear, unwavering answer. You know, in a world where It can feel like there are endless paths, conflicting ideas about truth. Jesus presents himself as the singular way, the absolute truth.
That provides certainty.
It provides a kind of certainty, a direction that cuts through the confusion. It really alleviates the anxiety that uncertainty breeds. It's like that firm anchor again, but maybe even more specific.
Okay, let's try and weave these threads together now. How does that declaration of divine sonship back in Psalm 2 connect with Jesus saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life in John 14?
Well, the divine sonship established in Psalm 2, it sort of lays the groundwork, right?
Yeah.
For understanding Jesus' unique authority, his intimate relationship with God.
Okay.
So because he is the Son affirmed by prophecy, affirmed by the resurrection, his claim in John 14 to be the exclusive path to the Father carries immense weight.
It's not just anyone saying it.
Exactly. It's not just a teacher or a wise man. It's the divinely appointed Son revealing the way to God.
And how does that trust in Psalm 27, that personal conviction, God as light and stronghold, how does that relate to the call to believe in God and Jesus in John 14?
I think that inner trust, that freedom from fear we see in Psalm 27, it kind of creates a receptive heart for the message of John 14.
Okay, interesting.
If you already know deep down that God is a source of light and security, it empowers you, perhaps, to embrace the call to believe specifically in him and in Jesus.
So you take that foundational trust.
And you focus it specifically on Jesus as the one who embodies the way, the truth, and the life.
It's really remarkable looking back at Acts how that early Christian community took those Old Testament prophecies and just saw them pointing so directly to Jesus.
It really is.
It wasn't just like random interpretation for them. They truly believed his life, death, resurrection, that was the fulfillment of those ancient words.
Absolutely. They weren't just passively reading the Old Testament scrolls. They were actively interpreting them through the lens of their experience with Jesus.
And the resurrection was key.
The resurrection was the pivotal event, the thing that illuminated those prophecies. It let them see connections they hadn't fully grasped before. And that understanding became absolutely central to their faith and their message to the world.
And running through all these different texts, the psalm about kingship, the personal psalm, Acts, John Strani, there's this consistent thread, isn't there? Overcoming fear, finding assurance in a relationship with God.
That's such a crucial insight.
Whether it's through the image of a powerful king or a personal protector or the definitive path to the Father.
Yeah, despite the different styles and different contexts, they all speak to the possibility of living with this deep sense of security and hope.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the psalmist's confident cry or the early Christians' conviction of the resurrected Christ, or Jesus' own comforting words. The underlying message is finding that firm foundation in God, a foundation that, dispels fear.
It really does feel like these sources, taken together, offer a sense of direction, especially when we feel most lost. They point towards a foundation of trust, a clear path forward.
Precisely. They offer not just comfort, but maybe even a framework for navigating life's uncertainties. By understanding God's promises, seeing their fulfillment in Jesus, and cultivating that personal trust.
We can find guidance.
We can find guidance and purpose even when the future seems pretty unclear.
So just to recap then, we've explored this declaration of divine sonship and authority.
Right, from Psalm 2.
Its powerful realization in Jesus as understood by the early church in Acts.
Mm-hmm.
The deep personal assurance of salvation and guidance we see in Psalm 27.
That light and stronghold idea.
And then that fundamental invitation from Jesus in John 14 to trust, to believe, and to overcome fear, which kind of echoes through all of them.
Yes, those are definitely the key connections, the threads that bind these seemingly diverse passages together. They paint a really consistent picture, actually. A God who is both powerful and intimately involved in our lives.
Offering a path.
Offering a path towards security and hope.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Considering these texts, what does it really mean for you to truly embrace this idea of a clear path, an unwavering truth in your own life's journey, especially when you're facing your own uncertainties?
That's a great question to leave with.
It's definitely something worth wrestling with long after our deep dive today. Thanks for exploring these profound words with me.
My pleasure. Always fascinating.